My name is Arya Stone, I'm 30, and the day my brother stole my startup idea, I was standing in a co-working hallway with a paper cup of stale coffee and a prototype on a borrowed laptop, listening to him tell a venture fund my story in his voice. If you're watching this, tell me where you're from and hit like and subscribe, because this is the story of how a betrayal turned into a blueprint, how a PowerPoint became a product, and how I took the thing he lifted from my Google Drive and built it into a $47 million empire he couldn't even get close enough to sabotage without setting off alarms I designed. The product wasn't sexy to most people, which is exactly why it worked. Compliance Ghost, a back-end engine that could watch unstructured documents blur past a company's servers and flag the 5 sentences a regulator would fine you for, with a timeline, a fix, and an audit trail in under 30 seconds. Boring? Maybe. Until you realize fines eat budgets and fear eats teams, and most solutions are pretty dashboards that can't hold a subpoena. I built the first version on night shifts after my day job because rent is a jealous god, feeding the model with public enforcement actions, old consent decrees, and a mountain of ugly PDFs that taught me what legal risk looks like without makeup. My brother Nolan had the kind of charm that tracks as competence until something heavy needs lifting. He'd visited my apartment one night with cheap wine and a warm grin, asked about how the little tool was doing, and I told him too much because family is a language that makes you forget NDAs are not rude. A week later, he pitched his company Ghostwatch to a fund I'd been chasing, using my screenshots, my demo story, even the dumb joke I made about software that sneezes when it smells a fine. I know because a junior partner who liked me sent a late-night DM. You in stealth thought your brother was the founder, and attached a photo of Nolan in a blazer he couldn't afford, clicker in hand, confidence on loan. I didn't scream, I took inventory, my repo private, my training data local copies and a secured bucket, my deck shared link I should have killed but didn't, and the doc where I'd written the strategy that mattered more than code. Sell the boring thing to the important people quietly before anyone else realizes it's a market. A sentence that would later fund a team and a future. Nolan's pitch landed him a small check, friends and family money from people who think a grin is due diligence, and a newsletter mention that made my stomach feel like it was standing in traffic. My mother texted, "Proud of your brother, teamwork," and attached a screenshot. I closed my laptop and let myself be sad for exactly one night, then I got clinical. I filed a provisional patent on the part that actually mattered, the classification pipeline and the retrieval trick that cut inference cost by 68%. Not because I thought a patent would save me, but because a timestamp can be a sword or a shield depending on who draws first. I incorporated under a name so dull it sounded like a parked truck, Cedar Row Systems, because I was done being easy to Google, and I wrote a one-pager I never sent to VCS. We are a company that will never trend. We will replace fines with invoices. Call me back if you've ever been paid in fear. Then I walked the floor where my customers actually lived, not the pitch rooms. Hospital compliance basements with humming servers and coffee that tastes like meetings, regional banks with risk managers who sleep like prey, manufacturers whose legal teams are 3 people and a prayer. I didn't sell them AI, I sold them less panic. Pilot in 30 days, redline whatever you want, we install in your environment, we do not move your data, and if we miss a violation you found, we pay the penalty on that line item as credit. The first yes came from a hospital counsel named May who had read my blog post at 2:13 a.m. and recognized the voice of someone who'd actually read DOE enforcement letters, her condition. No slides. Show me the thing. I stayed up 46 hours, refactoring the pipeline to run behind their firewall with an install script that would make a saint swear. And when I demoed in a windowless room with a flickering fluorescent, the engine caught a clause in a vendor contract that would have violated a state privacy law on update day. May leaned back like the chair had just been told a secret and said, "How many can you deploy?" I said, 2 now, 10 in 6 weeks, and texted 2 friends who'd sworn they'd quit their jobs if I ever needed them. Priya, who makes containers behave, and Tomas, who can choreograph cloud bills into ballet. I paid them insultingly low salaries and unfairly high equity because we were broke and I am allergic to lying about either. We moved into a sublet above a boxing gym, floorboards that sang when you walked, the air a permanently mild sweat, and we built guardrails like we expected to be mugged. 0 external rights, deterministic fallbacks, a paper trail you could hand a regulator without flinching. While we ground, Nolan raised a seed by taking my deck and pollinating it with buzzwords, hired a guy whose resume was a TED Talk, and launched with a video that made risk look like glitter. He DM'd me, "You should come work for me, you're great at the nerd part." And I muted him because I love my heart enough to not feed it poison. Ghostwatch signed a piloted e-commerce platform, put their classifier in the wrong place, and got blindsided when the platform's templates triggered 3 state AG notices in a week. They blamed the client because people who pitch solutions as personality always need a villain outside the room, and Twitter ate popcorn. We stayed quiet, shipped fixes, and wrote support docs so plain our clients emailed to ask if we were okay because no startup uses short words unless they mean it. A fund called, said the word rocket ship, and I said the word no because capital is a promise written in someone else's handwriting. Instead, I called a woman named Julia at a sleepy bank that funds equipment and asked if software could ever look like equipment if the collateral was a number. "We'll price it like a machine that cuts fines in half." And she laughed in the way people laugh when a new metaphor pays rent, and she wrote us a line a VC would never offer without pushing us into a TikTok. With that line and 2 paying pilots, we hired 3 gray-haired compliance officers who wear scowls like medals and named them Customer Love. They sat in our Slack like benevolent ghosts and told us where our beautiful ideas met a wall built in 1983. We moved fast and didn't break trust. Nolan tried to poach May by promising her a board seat, which is how you know a man thinks a word will change a woman who prefers results. She sent me the email chain, and I sent her cookies and a promise to put her name on a clause in our enterprise template that made sure legal counsel got bonuses when we reduced fines. Because the fastest way to get protected is to align incentives with people who actually sign things. 6 months in, Cedar Row touched 15 customers and we had a backlog we were ashamed of because we were raised right. Ghostwatch touched press and owed refunds. The first time Nolan tried to weaponize lawyers, he sent a cease and desist claiming I'd stolen trade secrets, defined as anything Arya ever thought in a room Nolan once walked past. And Para, the only lawyer I trust with my sleep, sent back a letter formatted like a poem where every line was a date. Git commits, document hashes, provisional filings, even my old landlord's repair ticket that proved I was debugging socket behavior during the hour Nolan claimed we whiteboarded the classifier together. His counsel withdrew like a tide ashamed of its moon. Our real leap didn't look like a leap, it looked like paperwork. We negotiated 3-year MSAs with early renewal discounts that made CFOs feel like they'd hacked us, while funds flow strengthened our lungs. We sold boring modules that sat between glamorous machines and made sure the glamorous machines didn't lie. And we turned our support team into the engine of product development by paying bounties for any repeated client pain they could eliminate. Priya's dashboards looked like naps, peaceful, regular, deeply earned. We didn't spam LinkedIn with thought leadership. We wrote breach drill scripts for clients and stayed up all night once a quarter running fake fires. One night, 2:41 a.m., our pager screamed and the cause was not us. But we picked up on the second ring and helped a client unwind a vendor snafu, because in the moment of fear, the only brand is whether someone answers. Customers started sending us pictures of their kids' school plays with captions like, "I made it," which is the kind of metric no one knows how to publish, but which is the only one that matters if you want to be invited back. After a year, revenue hit 8 figures and I bought coffee for my entire high school graduating class because I needed karma to remember I was polite once. Nolan went on a podcast to say, resentful founders hold back innovation, which was rich coming from a man whose product roadmap was my Medium archive. A journalist reached out for both sides, and I declined because winning in public is a tax. Instead, I sent a handwritten note to a regulator who once told me I was the only founder who could talk risk without condescending, and she introduced us to a federal task force that needed a vendor without a scandal. We scoped the work, underpromised, and shipped something that made a colonel say, "Nice," which is his Medal of Honor. That contract alone turned our signed backlog into a cliff we could climb for 18 months. The day Nolan tried to sabotage us for real, he didn't use code. He used family. Our mother organized a dinner, invited me without telling me he'd be there, and in the third course he chirped that the healthy thing would be to merge so he could bring his brand and my plumbing together. I put down my fork, thought about every night I fell asleep with a laptop on my chest so the fan would keep my fear from nesting, and said, "The healthy thing is distance." then paid the bill because I refused to let a man who steals pay with my card. The pivot point came with a conference we didn't want to attend. Julia from the bank insisted because even quiet companies need one loud day every year to remind the market their silence isn't absence. On stage under too much light, I told the only story that lands. A hospital that called us on a Sunday because an insurer moved a paragraph, and suddenly everyone's privacy policy was a lie, and we rolled the fix before Monday coffee and the fine that would have fed a small town for a year evaporated. A man in a blazer asked about moats, and I said, "Our moat is we answer the phone and the product does what we say," which sounded naive until our customers clapped, which they never do at these things. A week later, we closed a multi-year with a banking consortium that pays like a slow-moving glacier and crushes anything lazy beneath it. We scaled to 20, then 40, then 70 people. And every 10 hires, we stopped to repair something inside the company so we didn't grow like a weed pulled by the sun. The $47 million headline wasn't a valuation, though those were flattering. Now and then, it was a number we could defend in the only court I respect: contracts and collections. $47 million in signed, contracted, active annualized revenue across regulated industries with a churn rate that made our board send gifts, and a cash reserve that meant a recession would hurt but not kill. We built a training program for kids whose parents don't have LinkedIn, community college nights where we taught log reading and incident triage, and paid them to attend because free training is a lie poor people can't afford. We hired 3 of those students and cried when one bought her grandmother a chair that didn't hurt. When Nolan tried the last door, suing for my domain name because he'd bought a similar one and wanted to pretend we were stealing his traffic, our counsel sent him a lesson in trademark law so gentle it was biblical, and he stopped. The confrontation you think you want, the one with shouting and security guards, never happened the way movies want. It happened in a glass conference room during a diligence meeting when a strategic partner we were courting also held a small note in Ghostwatch and wanted peace, so their lawyers wouldn't have to read 2 piles of paper. Nolan arrived with a smile and a deck. I arrived with para and the receipts. He offered mutual licensing. I offered a settlement with a teaching clause. He could keep his company name if he ceased using the 6 phrases he'd lifted from our onboarding, turned off 2 features that blurred lines we could prove, and recorded a video for his staff about the difference between inspiration and appropriation. We signed, and when the partners' counsel asked if we wanted confidentiality, I said yes for most of it and no for the video. The next week, a clip circulated of Nolan explaining to a room how we learned the hard way that stealing someone's sentence is stealing someone's sleep. And it landed like a public service announcement I didn't know I wanted. I bought my mother a dishwasher because love is complicated and I am more interested in repair than theater, and I sent Nolan a gift card to a bookshop with a note that said, "Buy anything that wasn't written by a thief, because I am not a saint." You want the scene where I tell him off at a family party? It was quieter. He stood beside me at a graduation for our training cohort, watched a 19-year-old hug his dad in a suit he'd bought with his own money, and said soft, "You really did it." And I said, "We did. Because a village raised me, and the village deserves credit even when you want to hoard the light." Empire is a silly word for a company that pays sick leave on day 1 and has an office plant named after the bug we killed in the API. Empire here means durable teams that will eat next month, clients who sleep, a ledger that tells the same story the brand does. When the press finally wrote about us, I edited the word "girl boss" out twice and begged them to interview Priya instead. When a VC apologized for ignoring me and offered a late-stage check I didn't need, I sent him our careers page and asked him to send me 3 candidates he'd stake his name on. When a regulator used our audit trail in a case and wrote "vendor assisted with good faith," I printed it on cheap paper and taped it to the fridge because we are not too fancy for Scotch tape. And when I finally saw Nolan again, alone, no audience to feed, he said, "I thought brand was the product," and I said, "The product is the product." And we both laughed because sometimes it takes a war for someone to learn there's no shortcut around work. If this story found you drafting in a shared doc while someone else practices your pitch in the mirror, if your family thinks charisma is a business model, and you're tired of arguing with people who fall in love with their reflection, listen. Put timestamps on your work, put kindness in your contracts, put your product where fear lives and solve what hurts. And don't trend until you can afford to, because the quiet road is slower but the bridges don't burn when you cross them. Tell me where you're watching from, like and subscribe for more tight, true feeling stories about choosing measured revenge over noise. And share this with someone who needs to hear that you don't have to steal a crown when you can build a city, one clause, one call, one boring invoice at a time. Until the number in your ledger ends with 7 zeros, and the only thing left to prove is how you plan to share it.